Hello, this is Yarrow. Happy Friday. Welcome to my podcast. I hope you had a productive week. It's been a good week for me. Lots of moving pieces, lots of learning, and also just keeping the system running with my stable business with my agency. Today, though, I'd like to talk about something that you might be factoring in if you're towards the end of a business life cycle where you're kind of looking at your next step. In other words, you're considering selling your business. But I'd also argue this is a topic that's relevant for you if you're starting a business, because thinking about the end game and understanding what makes for a good business to sell is something I wish I knew when I started my first businesses. I really had a very rudimentary understanding of business, and I thought, if your business makes money, you can sell it. That's certainly true, but there's a lot of variables that go into making a business sell, get a higher multiple that you can factor in when you choose to start a business and how you structure a business. And it doesn't matter if you're considering selling now, or maybe you're just getting ready in the years to come to sell your business, and it's time to start thinking about maybe making some structural changes that will make it more appealing, get a higher multiple. So this honestly is relevant for just getting started, somewhere in the middle if you're hoping to sell one day, or you're ready to go now and you want to sell straight away. So let's talk about that. So the obvious fundamentals when it comes to selling a business, you're factoring in what's the multiple of how much money you can get as a sale price. Now that multiple typically refers to the net profit. So that's the profit after operating expenses, salaries, everything to run your business is taken out of it. Sometimes that includes a salary for you as the owner, or you and your co-founders as owners, or sometimes it just calls it seller discretionary income, which is when maybe you're not taking a salary, you're just taking all the excess profits, the dividends, could be contractor fees. You're just taking the excess money. That's the profit. You're not paying yourself a salary. Ultimately, what matters is how much money is left over for the owners at the end of the day. Now, that multiple can be anywhere from 1 year to, some of the most strategic purchases can be like 10 times the annual profit. That's rare. Typically, the ratio tends to fall somewhere between 3 and 5 times the annual net profit is the expected price you'll get. That's more so for agencies, e-commerce businesses. When you start looking at software, it used to be a case where you could get much better multiples, somewhere between 5 to 10. But that's dropping back now because of AI and the vulnerability of whether software will just be easily replaced with AI. And there's another factor too. The larger the number, the larger the multiple. So this is an interesting factor. If you have a business that's making over $1 million in free cash flow, in net profit, then you're going to do much better. You're going to get a higher multiple than someone who's making 500,000. If you're making 3 million or 5 million or 10 million, each time you get to these new brackets, the multiple goes up. So the bigger your company, the bigger the multiple, the bigger everything is. This is actually why you will see companies come along and acquire other companies and just mush them all together so they can combine all that revenue, all that profit, and increase the overall profit as an entity and then sell it, because they go from getting maybe 3 to 5 to now getting 5 to 10 times the profit. And all they did was take the same numbers and put them together into one entity. It is an interesting element. I always found that a little strange, but that's what people are looking for. Bigger deals, bigger money. I guess there's an element of potentially that being more stable. The larger you are, the more likely you are to be stable. I'm not sure if that's a bit of a fallacy, but I can understand the logic behind that. Anyway, the idea is the bigger it is, the bigger you get. But chances are you're listening to this and you've got profit somewhere in the hundreds of thousands. Maybe you're looking to get to 1 million, 2 million, and that's profit. I'm not talking about revenue. And that's an important distinction too. It's very rare for someone to buy a company based on just the revenue numbers. It does happen. It typically happens in the much larger venture scale companies where there's a lot of investment money that's put into a company. In the world that I play in, there's no VC-backed companies, so they're pretty much looking at profit. And frankly, that's actually way more deals are done with that kind of metric because way more companies are not backed by venture capital. And venture capital companies, by their nature, tend to burn hot and crash and burn quickly, or succeed, and then they're trying to do a rocket ship in just a few years. The reality is most small businesses are not doing either of those things. They're just this slow and steady, moving forward, hopefully growing, but it's not a rocket ship. It's not tripling every year, and it's not necessarily disappearing in the next 6 months either. It's just a steady business. So you look at the profit. So that's the first thing. Understand the multiples. So if you are wondering now how much your company might be worth, hey, if you're making $300,000 profit, let's say you run a small agency or an education business, 300,000 profit, you're looking to get 3 to 5 times that would be your selling price. So 900 to 1500, or sorry, 900,000 to 1.5 million could be your selling price. Now there's a lot of variables that impact that. So let's look at those. So you've got things like how the business operates. Can it operate without you as a founder is a huge, huge factor. So if you've got teams and systems in place where you can step away and a new owner can step in and take over and nothing collapses, it just keeps going, it keeps growing, it keeps getting customers, that's amazing. Now, the opposite of that is let's say you're running a YouTube channel. You step out, you're not making YouTube videos anymore. They can't put another person in to make YouTube videos who is the same person as you, although AI is possibly making that possible now. Most likely, though, that a creator-based business, a YouTube channel, something based on your face and your voice, while I feel funny saying this, it's probably going to be less of an issue with AI, but you have to be considering the fact whether you would sell your likeness, whether you would sell your voice to a potential buyer, which is a big decision. I actually faced that. I won't go into deep details here, but several years ago, I had the opportunity to sell my education business as I was kind of leaving it or slowing down very much what I was doing there as I moved on to my agency. And this particular business absorbs other teaching businesses that are on a similar topic. So they had an education business also about, in their case, I think it was running membership sites. Not exactly the same as my education business, but close enough that there's overlap in our audiences. So what they do is they absorb my audience if they were going to buy me. They'd also want me to stay on for at least a year to do a slow transition to a different voice, or maybe represent my voice but have someone else write as me. Very possible. Write my newsletter as me. Write my blog post as me. Write my social media posts as me. Business keeps going. They keep selling their products. It makes sense to them. I wasn't going to get a huge multiple. There would be an earnout. It was appealing, but there's one thing I did not like. I did not like that I was basically losing my personal brand. I'd have to let my voice go and be associated with my old education company. And if I ever want to do something else again, using my personal brand, there would be this sort of confusion point. Why is he still talking about his old subject over here and talking about something else over there? So I wanted to retain my personal brand. So I decided it wasn't worth selling it. I still continue, as you know, as you listen to me now, I still run my education business. I still do coaching. I still have this one personal brand. Now that's going to change with AI. People are going to be more comfortable to sell their personal brand, but I still would argue it is the least sellable business. So if you want to really make something more sellable, it needs to be an agency that runs without you, an education business that's not about you. It could be about your ideas, but there could be other faces, teachers, coaches, trainers in place of you. That could be a transition you need to make over time. An e-commerce business, obviously, is just physical products, so it's not about you as a person. And software, same story. So now all of these other businesses, agencies, software, e-commerce, could still rely on a personal brand for selling it. So you have to factor that in. If you have a SaaS tool, but you've always been the face out there heavily promoting it, you've probably seen that with several companies. I've seen agencies and SaaS tools, even a little bit of e-commerce, but more so agencies and software tools where there is a personal brand that's heavily promoting all the time. They're in all the ads, they're in all the social content, they're doing all this teaching, they're using education-based marketing to sell their software or to sell their agency services. Nothing wrong with that. Great strategy for marketing because it allows you to have that personal brand, presence and penetration, get that attention, that trust. But it makes it hard to sell because your brand is associated with the product. So when I started my current company with my agency, 50 Hours and Inbox Done, when it was first launched, I was using my personal brand to get us started. But after that, it kind of took a step back. And it was actually interesting. I remember maybe about somewhere around year 2, when we started getting sales and calls coming in that were not about me, which is great. I was very happy about it, but it was an interesting thing to experience because really my entire career up to that point was somehow tied to me. Well, not my entire career, but certainly the last decade as an education influencer type person, every sale was like, I knew Yarrow. This time, the starting point was that, yeah, I knew Yarrow. But after that, when we started to work on content marketing, it wasn't I knew Yarrow. It was just Google search, find article on website, book sales call, sign up for service. No touching. Maybe they read an article and my name was attached to it, but they didn't really connect the dots with my personal brand. And that was wonderful, great for the business to prove that it wasn't about some kind of relationship with me. It was just the quality of, the service and wanting this problem solved. And see that we could have this channel, this traffic customer acquisition channel that didn't require my name. So that turned my agency. I mean, I already knew it was going to happen, assuming the agency would continue. It wasn't about me, and therefore it has a much higher sales value. Now, it still unfortunately falls into the category of agency. Agency is one of the worst multiples for selling because it is a human-powered business. So there's always this kind of problem where you increase your revenue, but you increase your cost proportionally to deliver the service. That is changing though with AI. It is becoming, I guess, more affordable to deliver a service because your team can use AI and therefore your profit margin is increasing, but it's still nowhere near as good a profit margin as, say, a software business. And I would also say an education business. Education businesses, when you're selling a course, a membership site, there's a lot of profit margin there once everything is set up. Software, same story. Once everything is set up, you have a lot of profit margin. The problem with services, you need a human being ultimately to deliver the services. So there's always that sort of fixed cost that increases as you get more customers. So that's the first thing. How automated, how personal brand dependent, those are really important factors for the sellability of your business. Profit margin being the most important number in terms of getting the multiple, and also just business model, what multiple you can get, and size, how big a number are we talking about. So those are the main variables. The one other thing to factor in is strategic applicability. So is there some kind of aspect of your business that makes it more appealing to another acquirer? So you've got people who are just acquiring businesses based on the numbers. Pretty boring, pretty straightforward. Usually you get your sort of standard multiples. But when you want to get a much larger multiple, you look for a strategic buyer. So probably someone in your industry, possibly a competitor. Maybe, like I said before, it could be an equity group, private equity, or some sort of small group who put together money, who are trying to collect a bunch of companies of a similar industry or service type or product type and make a bigger company to get those bigger multiples and possibly flip it. It could be, a buy, acquire, merge, combine, flip strategy on their behalf, which makes you a strategic acquisition for them. You don't want to be doing that, though, in a position of weakness where perhaps, your business is going down, your industry is going down. That's more of like a liquidation sale. So what you want is to be in a highly sought after industry, all growing, and then you're a really, you're like the most attractive person at the party kind of situation based on what they're looking for. So that could be one aspect of a strategic buyer. Sometimes it's just you fit a little need they have. Like the software you've built is a perfect problem-solving tool for their customer base based on something they sell, combining their software with your software tool. Same with e-commerce, you're selling certain products. Maybe you're in the toy space and, you just sell this one toy. They're a bigger company selling a lot of toys. They acquire you. Happens a lot in physical products and food. I mean, the number of times I've seen my favorite independent chocolate bar start small, grow into something of a significant size, and then boom, Nestle or Cadbury or someone comes along and acquires it, and then your little independent player is now just one little cog in a large machine. But those companies will get a great multiple because it is a strategic buy, and often it's just a competitive move too. They want to capture something before another competitor captures it. That's different for small businesses. It's unlikely, if you're a generic provider, if you're an agency that's just doing web design or marketing or executive assistance like my company, it's not necessarily the most technically moving forward fast industry. So you're not going to get those wonderful 10x multiples. Unfortunately, I would love to get that for my agency. But I do have, and I'll end this now as we're getting quite along. There are some smaller elements that do make a company more appealing that matter too. I'll just end with, because I think about this for my own company. And this is important, especially if you're thinking about your business model and what you're going to sell, and maybe, any pivots you're going to make within an existing company going forward in the next few years. Certain things, for example, recurring subscription income and the stability of that's very appealing to buyers. The profit margin, like the fixed cost to deliver something, also very appealing. If you can get that Even 40% is a good number. 30% can be a good number. A lot of agencies are kind of running at 20% profit margins. So if you're doing 30%, 40%, you're outperforming. So recurring income, good profit margins, obviously lack of dependency on any specific one human is always good. That doesn't even have to be you as a brand. That might just be someone in your company. You take them out and your company falls apart. Obviously, you don't want to be an industry that's declining. If you can avoid that, you don't want to be an industry that could just disappear because some technology just wipes you out. You want to be in growth industries. You want to have competitive moats, recurring income, long-term stability. If they see you've been in business for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years and you've had steady growth or steady profits, that's also appealing. All these things contribute to the numbers you can get. I remember when I sold my first agency, it wasn't a huge deal, but there were some things there that were appealing. The first thing was I had established a consistent history. I think I sold it when it was about 6 years old, and it had grown steadily. The income kept coming in. I could point to exactly how I got the customers. It wasn't too difficult. It was easily to repeat. A lot of it was search-based, so it's just going to keep coming in. I showed how it wasn't dependent on me because it was a team of contract editors delivering the service in that case. And I already have an email database of new editors to hire whenever you need to, bring on more team members. One person could easily manage the day-to-day, or as I had an assistant, an executive assistant managing the day-to-day. So the new owner could basically step in and just watch how the company operated without breaking things, and make big strategic decisions in the future, but they weren't required to operate the day-to-day. That's huge when it's a smaller business. How much work does the new owner have to do and learn and to figure out in order to keep that business going? The less, the better. So there's all these little variables that make a difference. I could keep going, but I think you've got a fairly big list there to think about. Most importantly, if you're starting a new business, factor all of this in. Making a choice early on to choose the right business model, recurring income streams, focusing on systems as you grow, making sure there's no key man syndrome, as they call it, no key dependency. All those things matter. If you're already running and you're worried that you've got some weaknesses, but you want to get ready to sell, that everything I've said in here matters. So what you sell, how you sell it, key person risk, where the industries are heading in the future, strategic buyers, all that matters. You can adjust for that in preparation for the next few years. And also, obviously, if you're planning on selling very soon, same story. If you can prepare and present the best picture going forward, if you can have a lot of these boxes ticked. I mean, some things you can't change. It's just the nature of the business you've started and what decisions you made in the past. But if some of those things are changeable, it's good to make those changes if you're getting ready to sell anytime. And more often than not, those changes are just good business decisions as well. We all like recurring income. We all should have systems and processes. We all should delegate and have people running our companies. We should have nice fat profit margins. These are all things that make sense to do just in general as a good strategic business choice. All right. I will leave it there. Good luck if you are factoring in selling your business soon. That can be a life-changing and exciting moment. So hopefully this has given you some things to work on. There's a lot of information out there on this topic, though. You can certainly get out there and study more. I'll end it there. My name is Yarrow. Have a good weekend. I'll speak to you next week.